Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cultivating Business. I'm Kevin McLaughlin, Managing Director with Centri Consulting, where I lead our cannabis practice. We have two awesome guests today. Both will have interesting perspectives and look forward to speaking with both of them. First, we have Arun Kurichety, co-founder and chief operating officer of Petalfast. And in addition, we have Michael Mitgang, founder and managing director of WGD Partners. Extremely excited to speak with both of these gentlemen. Both have fantastic insights on everything cannabis, from brands, marketing, raising capital, and just generally how the industry is going to continue to evolve. So really appreciate both of you guys joining us today, and looking forward to chatting.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Yep. All right, well, why don't we jump right in here? So first we could start with you, Arun, go over to Michael, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the space, and then how you fit in the industry today.
Sure, and thank you again for letting me be a part of this. As you mentioned, my name is Arun Kurichety. I'm the co-founder, COO, and general counsel of Petalfast. As you can tell by the general counsel, I've been a practicing attorney for about 15 plus years. So I actually started as a corporate restructuring attorney in the kind of the Great Recession, 2006 to 2008, 2009, 2010. And I did that for about 8 years and really understood how companies were put together, both from a corporate structuring perspective as well as from a capital structuring perspective, and unfortunately how kind of those companies could fall apart, and building those back up. And kind of based from those experiences, I really just was fascinated again in terms of how companies are put together, and really always had the kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. I left kind of a big firm life. I was working at two firms, Kirkland & Ellis and Aiken Gump, which are kind of leading restructuring firms, and really was looking for something more exciting, some area where I could kind of utilize a lot of the legal experience that I have, but pair that with my entrepreneurial spirit. And right around that same time in 2016, Proposition 64, which was the bill to legalize adult use cannabis in California, was starting to gain steam here in California, where I was living at the time. I'd always had an affinity towards cannabis and really wanted to be part of kind of a new nascent industry, and really just jumped headfirst into the industry, started working with a number of trade organizations to help get Proposition 64 passed. And coming out of that approval, started to work with a number of companies coming out of kind of the illicit gray market into the licensed market. And really, that was kind of the first time when companies really started needing to be formed like a normal, regular business would be. Fast forward a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to work with a very large publicly traded company in the cannabis space, which is an ancillary company by the name of Kushco Holdings, which is now Green Lane, basically doing a lot of packaging and vape hardware. Not on the flower touching side of the business, but I was always fascinated by the flower touching side of the business. COVID happened in 2020, and I saw that the cannabis market was in a little bit of a downturn. I was really brought on to do a lot of more M&A financing type activity, and the company really wasn't really doing that. My partner at the time, Jason Vygotsky, who was the president of Kushco, had been working on an idea which has ultimately become Petalfast, which is, we'll get into a little bit later, but it's a sales and marketing company that represents a large portfolio of brands. Right now we're in California, Arizona, and Massachusetts. In any event, I really like the idea paired with kind of that entrepreneurial spirit. And in the summer of 2020, we launched Petalfast formally.
It's all history from there, right?
Yeah, that's right. So sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying I've been in the cannabis industry for about 7+ years, and really, there's been ups and downs, but we're still, excited about kind of where the future lies.
Awesome stuff. Michael, how about you? You want to provide a little background on yourself and how you got into the space and where you fit into it?
Sure, happy to. And again, thanks for having me. Michael Mitgang, co-founder and managing director at WGD Capital. We are a fund that's been dedicated to investing in the legal cannabis sector. I have a partner based in Vancouver, another colleague based in Tel Aviv. We currently have 9 investments. Actually, we've just made a new investment just 2 weeks ago, and focused on the cannabis sector. Our focus has been around the picks and shovels of the industry. So companies that are enabling the industry rather than cultivation, dispensaries, or brands. My background prior to forming the fund in late 2019 was 25 plus years in investment banking and principal investing. Started in the cannabis sector, really driven by firsthand experience with a family member who was dealing with chronic pain and seeing the real benefits of cannabis relative to, quite frankly, some of the pharmaceuticals that were being used. That led me to further investigation in the sector, and ultimately doing some deals, syndicating some deals, and then forming the fund in 2019.
Fantastic. It's always interesting to hear how folks, end up getting into the space. Sometimes it's a passion or a family member or whatnot. So we'll always love hearing those aspects of people's stories. There's been quite a transition, a little bit of, we'll say, focus from West Coast to East Coast, with legalization in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, et cetera. Arun, given your expertise, how do you see brands evolving on that transition, so to speak, from West Coast focus to now? There's heavy populations of recreational cannabis available on the East Coast.
Well, first off, I think it's just great news. Obviously, we're still waiting for federal reform, but the more states that start enacting legal licensed kind of regimes is good for the industry in total. So for the sake of not being too controversial and kind of pitting the West Coast against the East Coast and kind of the rap industry kind of battle, I'm just happy that both coasts are getting the benefit of licensed markets. That said, I will say that our kind of thesis is that we believe California cannabis is kind of the epicenter of cannabis. And given kind of the legacy market here, we do believe that a lot of the brands that have had success in the West Coast, that those brands will be able to translate over to the East Coast and then Midwest and Southwest and become truly national brands. So I do think that's kind of the next evolution, at least from a brand perspective. That said, as these licensed markets on the East Coast start to develop and mature, I don't think that the history and the legacy of those markets can be discounted. I think at that point, you'll start seeing East Coast brands, starting to have kind of more credibility and more power in terms of becoming national brands. I think the one thing that we'll just have to watch out for is just like what happened in California. You need to have like a very stable supply chain. And what I mean by that is that you need to have enough kind of inventory out there. So that means, enough cultivators producing enough products that you can start differentiating products and, differentiating brands. I think given that kind of licenses have just been starting to be issued on the East Coast, we're at the beginning of that cycle, but I think just more work needs to be done to get the supply chain to a state where it's similar to a California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, what have you. When that happens, I think, there will be a very bright future for those brands that were started and cultivated on the East Coast.
Yeah, and hopefully some of the supply chain and other issues and whatnot that took place on the West Coast, some of these other states can leverage some of that and learn from those types of things as they're rolling out their programs throughout the East Coast. Now, Michael, I know your expertise isn't necessarily branding, right? You're not plant touching. But similar to the question to Arun, how do you see the transition and more, we'll say, opportunity throughout the whole country impacting the way that you potentially look at investments or additional opportunities or different verticals that you have? How's that evolved as cannabis
Sure.
in general has become more available throughout the country?
So we actually can invest in plant touching companies. We haven't really at this point in time. We've steered away from investing in cultivation dispensaries, and to date, steered away from brands. Cultivation dispensaries is because has a lot to do with the fact that we don't see a lot of unique differentiation among those, and cannabis ultimately is a commodity product, and we've seen price erosion happen in a big way here in California and other states as those markets have matured. Regarding brands, we're very excited about brands. We think there will be some huge winners. At the same time, there are a lot of brands in the market today, a lot of brands in California that have whether they've licensed their products in New York or licensing the products in New York, or those products have found their way into New York. I ultimately believe that the West Coast brands will continue to be very attractive in those markets. The challenge, because of the way the industry is laid out, is those brands actually have to be actually manufactured in the state in which those products are sold. So the ability to really run a highly efficient brand manufacturing business in a multi-state environment remains challenging. And that's why this infrastructure, not just the supply chain piece about moving product from A to B, but the actual manufacturing of that. So we've steered away from brands to date, due in large part to that. We also believe today even that there is a lot of confusion, and it's difficult to truly differentiate one brand from the next. Here in California and elsewhere, you go into a dispensary, there are an inordinate number of vape cartridges to flower, and it's very difficult to really differentiate those. We have taken an approach with our focus on investing in really the picks and shovels by investing in enabling that supply chain. So one of our investments happens to be Petalfast. Why? Because we're less concerned about which brand wins at this point in time, but that all brands need to get onto dispensary shelves in order to succeed. And Petalfast is the best position to do that. They are very strong in California. They help brands get onto dispensary shelves, expanding into other geographies. And we see that as a way to really capitalize on the growth in those new markets without making a specific point bet on a particular brand. Over time, as we learn about which brands are maturing and becoming more successful, we'll ultimately make a bet, but I think it's still early. And the other challenge with brands, and we can come back to this, is the challenge around bringing that brand awareness to a consumer, given the limited ability to actually advertise those brands. And so that's another dimension to how do you create a real brand. It's not just posting pictures on Instagram. You've got to really, how do you create the next Coca-Cola? And you need a broad ability to deliver media attention to a broader consumer base than we can today.
That's a great point. A good little pitch there for anyone anyone watching today on Petalfast. Mike, I'll stay with you from an investor perspective. If you're looking at a business in the early stages, what can set that business apart as they're looking to go out and do some early stage financing? It's obviously very, very competitive in today's market, but what can kind of set a business apart as they're out in the market talking to folks trying to raise some financing?
Yeah. So the way we look, so overall today, the market to raise capital overall is very challenging, and within the cannabis sector is very, very challenging. If you look at some of the data, capital deployed in the cannabis sector is down 50, 60, 70% over last year, and last year was down from the year before. So it remains challenging, and starting a business trying to go out and raise capital in this market takes a lot of hard work. Early stage companies, I would have them focus on really friends and family. for the types of deals that we're looking for what's going to differentiate that company from another one. It's unique technology, product positioning, customer traction and validation, and revenue. We want to see if the dogs are eating the dog food. And, we see a lot of companies. We can get excited about lots of companies, but at the end of the day, are their customers excited about that business? Because that to us is a critical piece of validation. And, when they're technology or IP-based opportunities, we look to how those are differentiated from one business to another, because that, I think, ultimately is what's going to set those businesses apart over the long term. Recent investment we made was into the ad tech space. Top line revenue growing very nicely year over year. We're excited about where they're going in 23 and beyond. And we're also looking for things where they're not limited by a particular geography, whether it's California or New York, but businesses that can really scale across geographic boundaries and sometimes even scale into other verticals as well. And that's what for us, that's what stands out in making and selecting companies to invest in.
Awesome stuff. Makes sense. Yeah, you want to see some level of growth on the revenue side, albeit, might be smaller, but some growth there, right?
Some validation by customers, whether those are consumers that are coming in, you're seeing reorders happening, or software where licensing is getting software is being acquired and not churning out, or the churn rate is at a very manageable level, and you're continuing to get new customers coming on board and seeing that business grow.
Arun, shifting over here to you, moving back over to branding, your expertise. If you're speaking with a company that potentially adding to your accelerator or one of your pilot programs, and maybe provide a little bit of background on exactly how that fits into what Petalfast does, what can set that business apart? What are the things that you're looking for as you're talking to some of these prospective companies to fold into to Petalfast?
Yeah, sure. So, Petalfast at its core, it's a selling organization. So kind of similar to if you look at any other industry in food and beverage, or like wine and spirits, adult alcohol, think about like a distributor. And a distributor typically has two functions. One is kind of the logistics function, getting products from point A to point B. And then there's also the selling and marketing function. We decided early on that we were going to focus on kind of what we call the front of the house activity, the sales and marketing function, and partner with folks that could perform that logistics function. So here in California, we work with a company called Cannabis. In Arizona, it's a company called Consensus Holdings. And in Massachusetts, it's a company called Eagle Eyes Transport. So those companies basically do a lot of the logistics work, and then our team, as the selling organization and the field and trade organization. To Michael's point earlier, there's still a lot of restrictions around marketing and advertising. Budgets are also very small for brands. So we've decided to focus kind of on the boots on the ground, having people within the dispensary retail channels that are representing our brands and our brand portfolio to help sell through. So that's just kind of an overview of kind of what Petalfast is and the services that we provide. When we do a lot of work, a lot of diligence, we basically say no probably to 9 out of 10 brands that we're working, that are potentially going to be working with us. And why do we say no? Like, what are we looking for? It's kind of funny. Everyone comes to us. They're the best grower. They're the best, person that can make vape cartridges, or the best edible maker. Everyone's the best of the best, right? But what is really going to differentiate them when it comes to, consumers and at retail? And, funny enough, it's a lot of the same things that Michael was talking about when he's wearing his investor hat and looking at companies to invest in. we look at, folks that have a very strong management team that understand kind of the basic CPG principles, either from kind of the alcohol world or the food and beverage world. We want to make sure that those companies are capitalized. This is a very capital constrained, sector, given the federal illegality. I think, we're all waiting for institutional capital to come into the space. That just hasn't happened as quickly as we've all liked it to be. So again, kind of that strong management team paired with an ability to raise capital, or to be, to have enough capital to execute on a strategy that we would present to them, to that brand. And a lot of times that's, of course, having a stable supply chain, being able to produce quality, safe products, and then understanding kind of the pricing in the market. I've seen lots of pitch decks where people are still using pricing from, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Pricing has, compressed a lot just even over the last 6 months. So just being, able to work with smart people that understand the past, understand the future, have reasonable projections, and then have capital to be able to execute on a selling and marketing strategy that we think would be effective. I think, obviously you need to have a good product as well. But I think with the first two factors, kind of, if we can cross those off the list, then I think we have a pretty good shot of getting, your form factor, your brand onto shelves, and giving that brand a chance in the marketplace.
No, that's awesome. I mean, also maybe making sure they have a good accounting, finance as well. It's like I'm just joking.
No, definitely. I mean, when we do our diligence, like we send a pretty kind of rigorous packet of information that we're requesting. If you can't get through that diligence, then there's probably a good sign that our relationship is not going to pan out. And
Right.
A lot of that is obviously around kind of the financial wherewithal of the company. How do you run your books? Like, will you understand kind of the invoices that we send you? Are you on QuickBooks? Things of, kind of things of that nature.
Yeah, but to your overall point, certainly very, very competitive process, right? As folks are trying to get market share. I always like to end the conversations here, and I won't hold anyone to this, but like to get people's predictions. It's been a wild couple of years, wild start to the year. Can't believe we're already almost through April here, but would love to get each of your predictions for what's in store for cannabis in 2023. Whether it's some type of obviously it's not going to be federally legal, but something law-driven, reform, some type of prediction that you think is going to happen in 2023.
Well,
Well,
I've been predicting, or I wouldn't say predicting, but I've been optimistic that we would have had some form of federal legalization happen a lot sooner than it has or seems to be having. So predictions are very challenging these days. There's some recent rumors about trying to dust off something new around SAFE, but to TBD, who knows? I think 24 may actually have more to speak to than actually 23. I believe 23 is going to continue to be a challenging year. I believe that we're going to continue to see some rationalization happening with brands and other companies in the sector as there's consolidation, as some brands go out of business, others get acquired, and leaders gain more market share. You need to be well funded and well capitalized to weather through these uncertain times, and those that do get through it, I think, are going to be exceptionally well positioned. So my prediction really is that we're going to see more of what we're currently dealing with through the rest of this year. What's really going to take an exogenous factor, something at the federal level or otherwise. Of course, we're also going to continue to see New York figuring out how to build out properly in their markets, and the markets, at a high level, the markets are going to continue to grow. But in terms of where return and capital is going to be deployed, I think it's going to continue to be choppy.
Yeah, folks ask me this question pretty much like every single day. And the one thing that's certain is I tell people that I put my crystal ball away for 2023. But for sake of this conversation, I would just echo a lot of the same things that Michael has mentioned. I still think that there's going to be more pain, at least for another quarter or two. But that said, I do believe, just given where kind of valuations are, that there is an opportunity for folks from other industries to come in and kind of take the lead. I think you've seen kind of pharmaceutical, tobacco, and alcohol all dip their toes in the water over the last 2 years. And I think that there's going to be an opportunity for some or all of those folks from those industries to come forward and promote some more change, especially at the federal level. And my guess would be that big alcohol would be the one to start pushing things. Recently, a large trade organization, the Wine Spirits Wholesalers Association, the WSWA, for the first time came out with a white paper promoting federal legalization, similar kind of to the 3-tiered system that is prevalent in the alcohol industry. I think just that step in and of itself is a big deal for the industry. And I think it also shows that alcohol is really interested in this industry and is looking to be the leader kind of out of those other industries in terms of, pushing cannabis forward in the next, year, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, nothing earth shattering there, but I think that's the reality of it. I think everything in the space has just moved a little bit slower than everyone anticipated. So kind of status quo, but I think there is optimism more long term, right? You can weather the storm and get through it. And you do have an opportunity to be successful. So, Arun, Michael, really appreciate you guys joining us today. It was great chatting as always. Look forward to seeing both of you guys soon.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks very much for having us.
Absolutely. We have another great episode planned in May, so everybody stay tuned and please join us on our next episode of Cultivating Business in May.